We are here with another episode of Tasting Victoria Live. We're at the beautiful, the popular Clover Point, the contentious Clover Point sometimes. If you know, you know. And we're here with famous musician,
Oh God,
renowned free beerist, Aidan Knight. And we're here not for your music, although we will talk about that,
Okay.
but because of a little thing you've started up, which is a stand that you bring around to different parts of town in the summer where you have beer that is free of alcohol. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I get a lot of confusion from the plus 65 crowd when they come by and they say like, is the beer free?
Well, I mean, that's the hook.
I'm like, that is the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got you now. And they're like, oh.
Because the company is called Free Beer Asterisk.
Yes, I couldn't believe that no one had registered the name Free Beer for a business in BC before, so I guess that's where the whole thing started. I mean, the whole thing started because I stopped drinking, and I was just feeling like a lot of the options back then were pretty, how do you say, like uninspiring.
Yeah, and that was a couple years ago now, right? That was a little while ago?
Yeah, so that would have been 2017, or 2016 actually, sorry.
Yeah.
And the landscape has changed a lot since, and I was just sitting at my house one day and thinking like, I wish that I could try all these things, and more importantly, I would love to be able to like have them with friends or just like out in kind of beautiful locations. So that's kind of where the idea started. It was just sort of a bit of a laugh at first, and then I just went online and started registering stuff, and then I built this this cart just with like aluminum pieces and wood, and just.
So you made it all yourself?
Yes, yeah. My father-in-law helped me with like his tools.
Nice.
More of a man than I am.
Well, you got a nice marble, beautiful countertop
that's right.
here. It's real marble.
It's real marble.
You can tell from the wood sound that it's real marble.
Exactly. It's actually the interior of this countertop. Just added all this out. This countertop is actually it's exterior foam insulation underneath, and then it's laminated like counter laminate on top with pieces of Douglas fir around for the actual trim, so that you don't see the foam inside. So it's extra light. Everything on this trailer is trying to be as light as possible.
Yeah, I was shocked how light it was. I almost knocked it over.
Oh yeah. I do it all the time.
But you have to bike it around town.
But I do have to bike it around town. Yeah.
Yeah. How is that challenging? I mean, it's light, but it's still a big thing on the back of your bike.
Yeah, it is. It is challenging. I thought it was going to be a lot more simple, but the fact is that I'm transporting cans of liquid.
Yeah.
Usually about 60 to 70 of them in here with a fridge, with a compressor and a battery and signage and all this stuff. So it ends up being around 250 pounds or something like that.
Which is a lot.
So I have an electric bike that I tow it, but I guess the other reason behind, the first reason behind me doing this was I just wanted to sort of put good craft beer that doesn't have alcohol out there into the community. Yeah. And the other part was I just want to like ride my bike.
Yeah, it's a good reason to get you active, get you going.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. But so speaking to that first part there, yeah, there is really a craft beer, obviously, culture on the island, craft spirits as well. We've covered some of that. But obviously that entails drinking alcohol, which at the same time a lot of people are moving away from, or have had bad experiences with, or just don't want to commit to enjoy a nice drink on their afternoon. Can you speak a little bit to that niche that you're trying to serve here?
Well, I think about it this way. I think about when I was drinking and I first got into drinking beer, I don't know, 2004 or something like this. This was sort of early days. Phillips was starting to become a thing. You had Vancouver Island Brewing, you had Spinnakers, you had Swans.
Because you grew up on the island, right?
I did, yeah. And so at that time, it was not that common that you were getting a local IPA at a bar in town. And then it just became the culture, like it just became the thing. And maybe I'm a bit of a naive optimist about the whole thing, but I think that this is sort of a new wave of beer for people who don't want to drink for like a variety of reasons, whether they're just, whether they do drink and they want to just drink a little bit less, whether they're sober, whether they're pregnant, whether they're allergic to alcohol. I mean, there's lots of different reasons, right? Like why people wouldn't want to drink, but they still want to drink something that is good, like something that actually tastes good, something that's not just like, there's nothing wrong with a Diet Coke. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. My partner is the amount of Diet Coke she drinks would fill this every day.
Oh yeah,
basically.
Oh, I mean, like that could be a side business for me, just like filling this whole thing up with Diet Coke. That's the margins would actually be a lot better. But
yeah, margins on pop are really high.
Very good.
Anyway, if you missed, we're Pop Industry Live. We talk about the pop industry and its
all
margins. But no, to return to what you were saying, you're kind of talking about over the decades, people have brought kind of that appreciation for taste and craft into beer. Now, sounds like you're saying the next step is to bring the beer out of it.
Well, not the beer out of it, but the alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like the way that I look at it, and this is just unambiguously true, is in order to make a great craft beer, a great craft non-alcoholic beer, first you have to make a great craft beer, period. And then there are the techniques on how to remove the alcohol out of it. So what I was saying before about I want to have the ability to have the choice to drink something great, well, that wasn't an option for a while. And now it's becoming, there are more and more places that are, if not dedicated to, sorry.
No, that's okay. They're probably not loud enough to
good.
throw us off.
Where was I?
You were saying that essentially it's not you can make it without alcohol. You have to make it with alcohol and then get rid of the alcohol.
Yeah, and still make it taste good. But having the ability to sort of have a lot of different choice, I think, is like something that's been missing for people who have, been stuck with, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say like O'Doul's and like,
well, the classic,
I'll put it that way. There was a classic first wave, we'll call it,
and it was kind of like a nicotine patch type of thing. It was a beer substitute for people who were trying to stop drinking alcohol, which is important.
Yes,
but it was serving that purpose.
Yeah,
it wasn't serving the market of people's kind of appreciation for craft beer and brewing and the technicalities of beer that has emerged over the past, say, 15 years.
And a really great thing about beer and just beer in general is there's so many different styles that can be made. Yeah. But if you're only making like a non-alcoholic adjunct lager, and that's the only option that you can have. I mean, if you're someone who loves sour beer, or if you love saisons, or if you love, I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
Flemish,
such variety of taste has flourished,
yeah,
but it's not mirrored, or at least it wasn't until recently in the non-alcoholic market.
And it's totally, and it's getting better and better all the time, I think, as people are experimenting more with it. So in that first wave of non-alcoholic beer, essentially you'd make a beer and you boil the alcohol off, and with it a lot of the flavor. And then through more modern techniques, through putting the beer under vacuum and then being able to boil it off at a lower temperature, you're able to have more flavor remaining left over, and then additional dry hop. I mean, there's so many different there's so much stuff I could nerd out about.
And it's mostly in recent years that you're saying this is kind of flourished, or these techniques have become developed enough to kind of have a mass or like at least small batch production?
Yes. I would say that we are within, roughly a decade of having this new sort of wave. I mean, big producers like Athletic in the States, Partake up here. Those are kind of the two biggest players in non-alc stuff right now for beer. I think those were kind of developed around the sort of like 2010s. Yeah.
So we won't force you to nerd out.
Sure.
But I think it is a cool opportunity to kind of go through what a process that is pretty inscrutable to people. Like there's beer and there's non-alcoholic beer, and I think that it is quite an interesting process to turn the one into the other. So can you take us through maybe one example of some of these modern techniques to de-alcoholize a craft beer?
So I'm not a brewer. So I'll start off by saying that and I'm not
disclaimer.
Full disclaimer. I'm not someone who is brewing non-alcoholic beer. Although I would love to do that in the future. Hit me up if you want to do that with me. So there's a couple of different techniques that I sort of just briefly touched on. So the first way is very simple. You make a beer and you boil the alcohol off, and it's kind of a similar thing to like when your grandma back in the day would like make like a rum cake or whatever and say that it all just like goes off in the oven. I mean, I'm not sure how scientific that is, but it's kind of the same thing. It's about evaporation. But one problem with that is that a lot of the what are they called, like flavor compounds, I guess. I'm also not a chemist. They are also evaporated off. So you generally have a beer that is usually described as sort of musty and sort of like flat.
Those are some of the common complaints about non-alc back in the day.
Back in the day. And so one technique that they do is they actually change the pressure. It's kind of the same thing as like if you were to go and play against the Denver Nuggets, say, and then you're like at a different altitude, water boils actually at a different temperature. And
that's from the atmosphere.
From the atmosphere
this
pressure.
Is kind of an artificial a chamber or something where they're changing the pressure.
You're essentially putting the beer like into like a pressure cooker, I guess. I don't know if that's actually right, but you're changing the pressure. And the beer is boiled off at a lower temperature, and that flavor compounds, more of them remain.
The beer evaporates, but the other stuff doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, the alcohol evaporates. The other nicer...
I keep calling alcohol beer.
No, I mean,
yes, the alcohol evaporates.
Yes.
And the other flavor compounds, which is what we're calling them, remain because of different boiling points, I would assume.
Yeah. So I guess it's like distillation. I guess, like when you're making liquor and stuff. Again, I might be completely wrong. But and then there are some other techniques that brewers have been experimenting with. One of them is called nanny state, which is you actually don't brew the beer above a certain alcohol level, and you can control. This is how I understand it. Is you can actually control the level of fermentation by the yeasts that you are using to actually engage in fermentation.
So is it fermenting to a degree that doesn't reach the level of producing alcohol, or at least 5%, 3%, whatever alcohol?
Yeah. And so there's different ways of controlling that. And I'm sure there are other techniques that I don't even know about, or that people are working on in the lab right now.
But there's a few ways to get at it.
Yes.
And I would think that experimentation is growing as there becomes an actual market for kind of people drinking non-alcoholic beer just to enjoy it.
Yeah. And if I'm wrong, don't come for me in the comments.
I mean,
any of this.
It sounds right.
It sounds
for me,
sounds scientific.
Definitely not knowing about it. It sounds right.
Yeah.
Which I guess is how a lot of people get in trouble, is when something just sounds right.
I think at the end of the day, it's like if you taste a beer and you think it tastes good, then it is good, and it doesn't really necessarily matter which technique they use to make them. But I think the actual brewers are going in deep, because one of the biggest things that you are missing is alcohol, and alcohol does a really kind of a special, almost magical thing in terms of like the body of really any drink, whether that's wine or beer or spirits or whatever it is.
Yeah, because we notice drinks where the alcohol isn't detectable.
Yes.
Where it's, if you're in high school, you're pouring in so much orange juice or whatever,
For sure.
and that's often, specifically how people drink too much, is because the alcohol is undetectable. So it is in especially a lot of craft beers about working with that flavor, that quality of the alcohol in the drink as a specific part of the process.
So I find
And it's how do you replace that or substitute it or work around its absence.
So I find with a lot of craft beers, what they're doing is they are adding quite an expensive ingredient in hops and really like putting a lot of hops into their beers with really cool results. Like if you love hops in your beers, you can find some beers that have more hops than any any like double IPA like craft beer. They must have like so much dry hopping going on, which is like after brewing, adding hops. This is like after the boil. And so you get a lot of like flowery, fruity, sometimes kind of spicy notes to beer. And so like that's an interesting way of adding a lot of like intense flavor so that the brain is sort of not thinking so much about the thinness of some beers. And then there's some other beers that have lots and lots of thickness. Would that be like the correct?
I think it makes sense to say these in a way that a layperson can understand.
Yes.
Because like if there's some proper term for it, I'm not going to know it. A person watching is probably not going to know it. But we want to envision what it's going to taste like, what it's like.
So the one thing is, so I keep a spreadsheet of all of the non-alcoholic beers that I have ever tried.
Yeah.
And I have like notes about them. I give them a star rating because why not?
Well, you know, it's your business.
Yeah, of course. And one of the columns that I always look on the back of the can, because an interesting thing about non-alcoholic beer is that it's a food product, so it needs to have nutritional information to be sold in grocery stores. So it gives you all that, which beer doesn't do that. So you don't know how many calories, how much carbohydrates, how much sugar is in the product. So this is a really cool thing about this, is that you can compare one beer to another and say like, oh, this beer seemed really like thin and watery and I didn't really like it. And this one seemed like really intense and thick and sweet. And I don't know if I was into that one either, but this one's like a perfect one in the middle. So in my spreadsheet, I list what the calories of each beer is, not for like a dietary reason, but to actually figure out which ones I like. And they tend to be higher calorie beers, like usually over 50 calories. That's not always like a rule, but
there's kind of more in there.
Yeah, there's some beers that are up to 110 calories per like 355 milliliter can. A lot of European beers are like quite high in calories and they're super flavorful and like really delicious. And
so do they taste quite dense?
Some of them do. Yeah. There's a Belgian maker who's making Belgian style like triples and even like creeks, which are like fruit beers, like cherry beers. And they're super like thick. I think all of them are over 100 calories per bottle. But then I also like the nani stuff that I do is like probably 40 or 50 calories and it's super flavorful and thick and it's like very satisfying. So there's not really a hard and fast rule.
But you're trying to kind of figure out some of those correlations and develop this kind of web of what causes what. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm able to talk to people who come up to the stand and are asking me questions and I can tell them things like, you know, if you're drinking a 6.5% IPA every day, that's like you're drinking 250 calories per can. If it matters to you, then that's great, and if not, then whatever. But you can drink like 5 of these nani pale ales in comparison to one 6.5% pale ale that you get from.
And I guess it's not just a diet thing. I would assume that has an effect on how people feel after several cans, and you know, aside from the mental effects, there's like often alcohol. You're just putting a lot of material into your body. And so you're finding that, especially kind of out on hot days like this, are you finding that the non-alcoholic beers are kind of easier drinking, lighter drinking?
Yeah. So I mean, as someone who doesn't drink, it's kind of hard for me to say like one to
think back and compare.
Well, just to be like 1-to-1, be like, is it more delicious to have an alcoholic beer on the beach or a non-alcoholic beer? I can say that I've had lots of non-alcoholic beers on the beach that have been like very refreshing. So, I mean, it's, I hate to compare, you know.
Yeah, well, fair enough. But you talked a little bit about European producers, some of the stuff they're doing. What are you finding are some of the regional specializations, are they exactly the same as kind of the beer specializations? Is there a different landscape emerging with non-alcoholic beer? What do you see in different parts of the world in terms of what's being made?
Well, the thing about the beer industry is it's definitely driven by trends. Like you'll see like a big, yeah, it's driven by trends. You will see multiple breweries chasing down, getting really into sours, getting
Totally,
really
yeah.
into like Italian Pilsner style, getting really into, uh, you know, doing artisanal lagers or like, like whatever style, and there's not as much of that in the non-alcoholic space right now because there's such limited amount of products, and
Yeah.
it's quite intensive to like be making these and canning these and getting them out to distributors
Yeah.
and things like
You
that.
can't rattle off as many different varieties as
Yeah.
one brewery.
Exactly. So there's not quite the same flexibility to be chasing lots of different styles all the time. But I think that's going to. I think that's going to change. I think eventually you'll probably see, hyper local craft non-alcoholic breweries that are just doing non-alcoholic stuff.
Just doing non-alcoholic.
Yeah, I think so. Just because to set up your brewing facilities in a way that's like really streamlined to be making like that all the time, and to be able to make lots of different sort of little one-off like little kegs that you can just have at your tasting room.
You got to kind of tailor the whole
I think
process
so.
to it.
I think so. I mean, again, like I could be wrong. Maybe every craft brewer in Victoria will start making their own non-alc. I think that would be great. But you sort of need to have a dedicated production line that's doing that. So I think that's one thing that's preventing them.
Yeah.
But I see local style, like towing pretty close to what's going on. So it's like there's West Coast Pale Ales, there's Czech Pilsners, there's a couple sour styles that are coming, Gosas, some Radlers, some, not as much dark beer is happening. And I think there's definitely some room for growth in, catering to people who like dark style, Belgian style. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Where is it in sours? Is it all different? Where is kind of the most exciting direction you're seeing, say like this past year, like the newest stuff? What are you seeing as being kind of at the forefront of non-alcoholic
sadly,
beer?
a lot of it's American and it's really hard to get up here. So I'm ending up having to order it through friends and then like get it to the border and like get it across the border because it's, I don't know.
The classic multi-step jurisdictional mailing.
I feel like a friggin' rum runner. No. The exciting stuff is I really like sour beers, and I think it really lends itself well to non-alc style because it has a lot of it's like citric acid, like sour candy kind of stuff, but it's still like savory, and you can do lots of interesting things with like dry hopping sours and stuff.
And that's kind of a space that with kombucha and some of these drinks, people are already a bit accustomed to.
For sure. Yeah, this season for me, I've been really into hop waters, which are just like a hop tea that they carbonate. So it's just hops and water, and they're just extracting sort of flavor out of the hops and then carbonating it, and it just gives you a really nice, refreshing, it's like a very bougie, like bubbly kind of thing. So category 12 locally is doing that. And then Lagunitas are they're the sort of pioneers of selling their hoppy refresher water, I think is what it's called. And I'd like to see more places doing that because I know from like hardened beer drinkers who some of them just aren't into, the near beer thing. Like they don't want something that's beer. They want something that has like very, very little
distinctive.
Yeah, it's like distinctive, very little calories, something they can drink in between like sessioning other beers. I think hop water and like hop kombuchas and things like that could be popular with them. Yeah, I'm sort of excited about all of it, but it's sort of very slow coming up here, and like BC is a little bit behind Alberta, and I see Ontario sort of kind of coming up with more stuff. So I'm hoping that
Because usually BC is kind of,
Yeah.
winning these kind of beer awards and is seen
Yeah.
as, especially Victoria, is seen as kind of the epicenter,
Well,
at least one epicenter of like conventional
yeah.
craft beer.
I would say that, yeah, Vancouver and Victoria and like the Lower Mainland in general, not just Vancouver, but there's a lot of good beer that came out of there, and they really exploded in the late 2000s, 2010s,
Yeah.
and then the rest of Canada sort of caught up.
At this point.
Yeah.
And then you're saying that even BC isn't necessarily at the forefront like it
Yeah.
was then of non-alcoholic.
Yeah, I would say we're still probably another 4 or 5 years away from it really like bubbling up and like being like a major thing. And if it doesn't, then
Well, yeah, you'll be kind of along for the ride, whatever direction it does go.
yeah, I mean like my wife was telling me like the best part about this business is like whatever I don't sell, I can just drink.
That is true. Yeah, I think drug dealers typically give the opposite advice, but the
You're
beauty
right.
of this is that it's not a drug.
Yeah, I'm not really getting high on my
You're
own
just
supply.
you're just getting refreshed on your own supply.
Yes, that's right.
The so the cart you built.
Yes.
The next step of that though is to actually bring it out to places, go to farmers markets, come out here to Clover Point where people are congregating in the summer. But it's a bit of an unusual thing. It's not a food truck, it's not an ice cream stand. What are some of the challenges to actually make a go of it and get out there and get licensed and all these kind of hoops you have to jump through?
Well, so I'm permitted and licensed through the city through the mobile bike vendor program, I think is what it's called.
Yes, something like that.
And the process to get approved for that was really interesting because normally I think they're thinking that these are going to be like hot dog carts and ice cream stands and like mobile food vendors, which I kind of am. I guess I'm like a beverage vendor, but because everything's in cans, when I talk to the regional health authority, they're like, oh, you're fine. You're selling like a pasteurized canned product that has all the nutritional information on the back. You're fine. And the problem was actually getting into the farmers markets because I am importing and selling from multiple different producers.
Versus they're typically looking at someone who is producing
Yes.
themselves
Yeah.
down the road on
Yeah.
the farm,
Yeah.
bottling it themselves, whatever product it might be, and bringing their own stuff straight to market versus you're kind of curating
Yes.
what exists.
Which again, I would love to do that. Hit me up if you want to do that.
So it is one of your goals to eventually be making your own, taking the knowledge of how to do it and trying to create something.
Yeah, or at the very least, maybe I don't want the headache of like being a producer. Maybe I could just be like an ideas man.
Yeah.
just like taste testing, just a taste tester, professional taste tester. I don't know.
Yeah. This dream really like scaled down immediately.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
it went from I want to create my own thing to I'll taste test.
well, it's just
I'll take a sip of it.
so because I have family and friends who all work in the brewing industry, I sort of know like the headaches behind
That is true.
brewing, and it's great. I mean, they say it's a recession-proof industry, but I mean, if you look at like the beer news periodicals, you see like one of the oldest craft brewers in America called Anchor just went bankrupt.
Really?
And there's it's not as bomb-proof as you think.
But so getting back to what you're saying, the permitting, the farmers markets, the hurdles.
So I've been having a hard time getting into the farmers markets just purely based on where do you put me? Am I a food truck? I'm not really a producer. I'm trying to figure out where I fit as someone who, like, I think that I'm doing kind of a community service by providing like alternative drinks for people who they need to drive, or they're pregnant or sober, all the reasons why I sort of like got into this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have to respect that, you know, most farmers markets, they have a sort of a mandated, their vendors need to be, you know, producers in order for them to probably apply for funding, like provincial and local funding, and I don't want to jeopardize what they're doing.
So you're just trying to figure out how you can be categorized in a way that it works.
I want to do what's best for everyone. I'm a real people pleaser. I have been working with some specific brewers in order to make these farmers markets work, where I don't sell a whole lineup from multiple producers. I'll actually go in and be able to, you know, sell one producer at a time, and I'm hoping that will kind of get me into the good books of these markets.
Yeah. Well, and give you more options where you can do the full selection in certain places.
Yeah.
You can do kind of one place
exactly
when it's applicable.
Yeah.
And so, I want to also, while we got you, talk about your own music and your insights into kind of local music, the history of it, where you kind of see the scene going. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about kind of how you first came up in the Victorian music scene and the Canadian music scene. I mean, this was a couple decades ago almost now.
Oh God.
Not to highlight how old you are.
It was so long ago.
But you started really young.
Yeah, I did. I graduated high school and I started touring in bands and putting on shows and being involved in music, because it was the thing that, really the only thing that I really knew how to do. Still really the only thing I know how to do. I don't know what I'm doing here, but so at the time when I was starting, it was very feasible for musicians to get in the van and go and drive across the country and play shows and go to the States and go to Europe, and I did all those things, and I did lots of touring across this country, probably seven times across the country, a bunch of times through the States, a bunch of times through Europe, and I had a really amazing experience doing all that. And then part of like being in music is like being around free beer all the time, like getting paid in beer sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
It's always in the backstage.
Pictures on stage,
Yep.
glass on the stage.
And so I ended up using beer to be able to get through shows, and that's kind of like where the whole not being able to drink anymore, just through that whole process. And so then when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next in music, which was right around the time when I was like thinking about all of this sort of like non-alc beer and thinking about, oh, do I want to produce it or sell it, or like what am I going to do? I've also had this dream for the past 10, 15 years to be able to work on music in my own studio. And so that sort of led me down this circuitous path to eventually starting to build a studio in my backyard in Victoria. And that's my real exit strategy.
From the music industry?
Kind of from everything. Like, this is like me doing free beer is like, this is my fun like summer grind set side hustle. But my main thing is actually working on music, you know, engineering and producing and writing and recording. And I've had a really satisfying career, you know, playing my own music all over the world. And now I'm the most interested in playing like facilitator for other people, and still being involved in music and making music, and I've always loved like recording music and getting really deep into the sound.
So you want to move more into the producer, facilitator kind of role, and I mean, you've talked to me before about how you really feel that there's a need for that with how, I mean, we've we can talk a little bit about it here, but yeah, just some of the shift in Victoria over the past, I guess it's getting close to 10 years now, 7 years maybe, of it used to be you could have a basement show quite easily, a rundown house, and people just gig in it. But now, people are being evicted, people don't have as much space, people have to work more.
Yes.
Instead of 25 hours a week, you got to do 40, 45 hours just to afford to live somewhere. And that's really resulted, I think, in a lot of people going to Montreal, just fewer shows going on, not as many kind of DIY venues.
Yeah.
Are you hoping that that by making a more accessible studio, you can kind of counter some of those trends?
Yeah, so it's kind of too bad that I had to retreat into like my own like private recording studio. I wish there were more publicly available spaces for people to make music. I mean, I think that's a dream like worth exploring. It would take a lot of people coming together and figuring out how to, lock down a production facility that could work for everyone and figure out how to run it like a co-op essentially, which I think would be amazing. Yeah, the affordability for artists right now is very grim. I would say, specifically where we live. I know there's lots of places that are suffering from affordability, and I think you really nailed it, that people have to work more so that they have the ability to have groceries and rent and just like a basic quality of life. And then adding on top of that space that you can make, like for us anyways, for musicians, you have to be able to make sound in them. So they have to be relatively soundproof or away from other people, or I guess you can live in headphones. So that's certainly a way of doing it. But to have a space where like kids can go and like start a band and have drums essentially. So loud. Drums are so loud.
Yeah, exactly. It's time you need to have for it that you can spare away from work. And it's, a space of some kind that you need where your neighbors are not going to complain because they're paying all this money and they want their peace and quiet or whatever.
Pickleball.
Exactly,
right? Pickleball.
So there are all these kind of, if not barriers, then at least hurdles.
Yes.
Or kind of factors at play. The more factors there are in the way of everything that goes into music, whether it's live venues themselves, being able to get to those, practice venues, being able to spare the time in the week, it altogether starts to kind of sap what's possible in the scene, because kind of part of how the scene came up was an abundance of, say, DIY shows and these different things that facilitate music happening. So besides kind of, you're hoping to start your own studio, you're hoping that at some point there can be kind of group run or publicly run accessible studios. What else have you kind of seen change in the scene, especially as the result of some of these kind of logistical factors, and what do you think could be done to improve it or restore it or that kind of thing?
Oh, that's like $1 million question on how, because there are so many things that are sort of all intersecting together. So like housing affordability has to be the number one thing, because everyone needs a place to live. And so the sooner that whole thing can get dealt with.
We could just get on that.
If we could just like really get on that right now, that would be so sick. So that's one of the main things, but I was just going to respond by saying that like Victoria has always been a relatively expensive place to live. I mean, I think things have really exploded in the past, I don't know what you'd say, probably the last 10 years at least. But it's been like this for a while. So we've had a lot of sort of flight out of the city for people leaving for Montreal or even Toronto, even though it's expensive there. But I mean, as someone who's grown up here, I've seen a lot of really like great, interesting artists and musicians like leave town because of just wanting to go to other places, whether that's like a Gulf island or Montreal, whatever it is. But being able to actually foster an artistic community in town, I think requires people to have leisure time to be able to go out and, see music and be outside with friends and not thinking about like the 9 to 5 all the time, how they're going to survive and pay rent and groceries and all that stuff. So that's all going back to affordability. But I think I think the city could be, or all of the municipalities could be doing a lot more for arts, funding and facilities in general. And I've talked to city councilors about this stuff. It's like, if you want less, this is like hyperbolic, but it's like, if you want less crime, you need to tackle affordability and things for people to do, so they, have, so they have outlets to like be able to, get through their day without thinking about what am I going to eat and how am I going to get it?
Yeah. And it speaks to quality of life more broadly. It's, as you said, there's kind of, if someone is a musician or an aspiring musician, it isn't just that they want to work that X amount that it takes to put food on the table and have a roof over their head. People are driven to kind of create stuff for themselves and for their neighbors. And Victoria at one point, this is going back 20 years even, but for a good stretch was known as I think the jurisdiction in Canada with either the second to Montreal or neck and neck with Montreal as having the most artists and musicians per capita. And I think that has formed a big part of what has made Victoria an appealing place to live, of what people might see as a vibrant place that they want to come to. But it's kind of that quality to it is being kind of eaten from the inside in a sense. And there's kind of what can the interventions be to try and bring back some of that or maintain what's there, and that kind of thing.
I guess just on like the most basic, we need, venues, practice spaces, and then I still think we need places where people can like interact and like mingle with one another in a like sort of a serendipitous like kind of way. Like I remember, and maybe this is like looking at things through like a nostalgic lens or whatever, but I remember going to shows when I was like a teenager, and it was just, that was the place where you went and made connections with not made connections, but like you saw your friends, and you ended up like talking with them and sort of like dreaming up like things that you wanted to do, projects, whatever. And I kind of worry that through the pandemic and and onwards, it's like we can't have an insular community. We need to be able to come together and work on things. So I'm hoping that my future studio will be sort of like a hub where lots of people can come through from, whether they're just coming through town on tour or they're, new residents, they've been here for a long time, whatever, just like be more connected with other kind of like-minded or even not like-minded artistic individuals. But I don't know.
And so when are you hoping that that's going to be ready? Your backyard studio?
It's a very sensitive question.
Okay. These things often are with
it'll
construction
be
projects.
like 2029. No,
no.
I'm hoping for sometime this winter. So I don't know if it'll be like the end of this year or the beginning of next year. But there's quite a lot of things that are involved with wiring and finishing a lot of things and making the acoustics good in the studio. But I'm excited. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. Like I have walls and a roof, and
it's coming together.
Once I have a front door, I'm going to be really excited.
That's the key.
I've been saying that's like the most excited that I'll be over the whole project is once they put a front door on.
All right, well, you've got that base that you're going to set up, and you've got this that is mobile and out in the community. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask you what it's been like just out on the streets here at farmers markets, at these different places you go. What has the reception been like?
Really friendly. It's been like sometimes a mixed bag in terms of like how much people want to talk about beer or whatever. Some people are just like, I just want one, and then some people want to come up and really ask you a lot of questions, and they're really curious about the whole thing, especially when it's called free beer.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's free.
Yeah, dude, I mean, I hope no one gets too riled up when it's not
No, it's
alcoholic
okay.
beer that is zero cost.
I've probably given away a free beer or two just to people,
just to placate.
just to be in there. But it's been great. I mean, this is only my second summer, and I've already learned a lot about where to go and when to go there, and I'm always trying to think about what the next place or places are. So we'll see. It's treated me well.
Well, what's the next step, and where can people find you this summer?
I will be at the Eventide Music Series on Wednesdays at Centennial Square right in downtown Victoria, right by City Hall.
Yeah, really cool program.
And I am, as I mentioned before, I'm working on getting into quite a few farmers markets in town, and I'm hoping I'll have all that information up on Instagram and on my website. And I'll probably be at a few more festivals this year. I did Campbell Bay Music Festival on Main Island, and I'd like to do a couple more Gulf Islands or even just right here in Victoria. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll see you out there.
Thanks, buddy.
We'll have a sip.
Yeah.
For Tasting Victoria Live, I'm Cam Welch. He's Ryan Hook. He's Aidan Knight.
Who's that?
We'll see you soon.
That's Pancakes.
Oh, Pancakes the dog is here as well. See you soon.